going to talk about every single type of halberd, but I am going to talk about general trends as they seem to develop in and around the Low Countries, but these same trends seem to develop at the same time throughout Europe. Now, how do I define a halberd? Well, there are always exceptions, but a halberd is almost always taller than the wielder. When they get shorter than the wielder, then I think we start getting into pole axe territory, which is wielded and used differently to the halberd. Halberds always have a blade on one side, a hook on the other, and in line with the shaft they have a spike or spear point, and the head is attached to the shaft via sockets and langets. In the 13th century we come across the term halbarden, then referring to large-bladed, long-hafted axes. The word derives from the word halm, meaning long, and the word bard, meaning axe. Also in the 13th century we see the term helmbard. In the 15th century we see it spelled as hellebaard, and in the 16th century we see it first spelled as hellebaard as we would spell it today. The English word halberd derives from the same root as the Dutch hellebaard.
Slaat op den trommelen van dieren om dijnen, slaat op den trommelen van dieren om.
In the 14th and 15th century we see polearms pop up that some historians define as proto-halberds or demi-halberds. Some would also call them volge. You have a different mounting system than the typical halberd, since the head is attached to the haft by rings instead of a socket and langets. And from the late 15th century we start to see halberds with enclosed sockets. These halberds often have a broad sturdy point, diamond shaped in cross section, often with some cutting potential. Apart from military use, we also see halberds used by bodyguards, as well in military as in civilian settings. This will persist into the 17th century. From around the middle of the 16th century, halberds start to become lighter, with longer, more spike-like points, more pronounced hooks, and thinner, smaller blades. We also start to see halberds with a crescent-shaped blade with a concave edge. This is when the halberd evolves from a primarily hewing weapon into a primarily thrusting weapon, and chopping became secondary, since these crescent-shaped blades were more optimized for trapping and hooking than for actual chopping. The Italian fencing master De Grassi mentions his opposition to these new lighter halberds and advocates for the older style with points that had some capacity to cut. In the second half of the 16th century we start to see decorations in the form of cutouts in the blade and hook, as well as extra added hooks and spikes. Also in the second half of the 16th century we see the halberd being used less and less by infantry. At the end it only being used as a sign of rank for the officers. For instance, between 1588 and 1598 the Dutch model infantry company, existing of 134 soldiers, of whom 12 were equipped with halberds. And there are no mentions of any soldiers, any infantry soldiers, apart from officers, being equipped with halberds after 1598. From a little bit before 1600 we see the cutout decorations in the blades take shape in the form of sea creatures, mermaids and mermen. In this period the halberds became lighter again, with the blades getting thinner and the spikes getting shorter and more spear-like than spike-like. Now, I'm not saying that all halberds in this period had a crescent shape or a concave edge. There were still halberds being made with straight edges, and older ones were also still being used. For instance, there is an order from the Swiss from the first quarter of the 17th century. They ordered a batch of halberds of the Sempark style from the Dutch for a city's militia. What I'm mentioning is just a general trend. To the middle of the 17th century we see more halberds with a straight edge again. They are simpler in decoration, and this look would remain well into the 18th century. In this period we also often see that the blade and the hook are often mounted separately to the haft than the point. From the beginning of the 16th century, we see halberds pop up in fencing schools, and they remain in use there well into the 18th century. For instance, in 1521, in the city of Ghent, in what is now Belgium, members of a particular fencing school were affectionately called the Halberdiers, or the Halberders in English. The halberds used in fencing schools often have a rounded convex blade. This is probably because it's a bit more safer than a concave blade with hooks and spikes. There's still a lot more research that needs to be done on the different types of halberds and the evolution of the halberd. This is just the information that I could find. And if you have any questions about this video, if I've got anything wrong, please leave it in the comments. Or if you have anything to add, also leave it in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video.
Trommelen van dieren, de gordijnen, vevelig is nu de leus. Spaanse pauken ligt als sneeuwvlokken, Spaanse pauken loos en boos.